Okay, you're thinking about owning a bowling alley. From the customer side, the business can look wonderfully simple. People reserve a lane, rent shoes, order food, buy drinks, play a few arcade games, and head home after a couple of hours. But ownership is not mainly about collecting lane fees. It is about controlling a large entertainment property filled with mechanical equipment, food service operations, staff, utilities, leases, maintenance obligations, and customer traffic that changes dramatically by hour and day. This breakdown will show where the investment goes, how a modern bowling center actually earns revenue, why a busy building can still produce disappointing cash flow, and what separates a durable operation from an expensive property that never earns enough to justify the capital tied up inside it. Start with the physical business. A bowling center is not just an open room with polished lanes. Each lane depends on a connected system: the lane surface, pin setting equipment, ball return, scoring hardware, sensors, displays, seating, and the mechanical space behind the pins. Then add heating and cooling for a very large building, electrical distribution, fire protection, restrooms, commercial refrigeration, cooking equipment, ventilation, point-of-sale terminals, reservation software, cameras, networking, sound, lighting, and often an arcade. If alcohol is served, the owner also inherits another layer of licensing, inventory control, liability exposure, and operating procedure. That combination is why the purchase price of an existing center never tells the whole story. The building may be standing and the lanes may look usable, while deferred maintenance is quietly waiting in motors, compressors, roofs, drains, kitchen equipment, lane surfaces, and outdated technology. That creates the first ownership question. Are you buying a functioning cash-producing operation, or are you buying a collection of assets that will immediately demand more capital? An older center can be attractive because much of the expensive infrastructure already exists. But the discount only matters if the equipment, building systems, customer base, and lease are still economically useful. A cheap center with failing air conditioning, tired interiors, obsolete scoring, weak food service, and a short lease can require so much reinvestment that the low acquisition price becomes misleading. If you enjoy business ownership breakdowns that separate sales from actual owner economics, this is exactly what this channel focuses on. The useful question is never simply, how much revenue does this business make? It is, how much capital does it absorb? How predictable are the customers? What costs remain fixed when traffic slows? And how much cash is left after keeping the operation competitive? For a new bowling center, there is no honest national startup number that fits every project. A compact boutique venue inside an existing commercial shell is a completely different investment from a large suburban family entertainment center built from the ground up. The capital plan normally has several layers. First comes the real estate, purchase, lease deposit, tenant improvements, construction, parking, accessibility work, signage, and professional fees. Then comes the bowling package itself. After that come kitchen and bar equipment, furniture, arcade games, software, security systems, opening inventory, licenses, pre-opening payroll, marketing, and working capital. The real estate decision changes everything. If you buy the property, you commit much more capital up front, but you may build equity and gain more control over long-term occupancy. If you lease, the initial capital requirement can be lower, but the business becomes dependent on lease terms, renewal options, escalation clauses, common area charges, taxes, insurance provisions, and the landlord relationship. Lucky Strike Entertainment's public filings show how significant occupancy structure can become even for a large operator. Its leases can include base rent plus items such as common area maintenance, utilities, property insurance, real estate taxes, and in some cases variable payments. That does not tell you what one independent center will pay, but it illustrates why monthly rent is often only one line in the occupancy equation. Location is especially unforgiving because the lanes cannot follow the customers. A restaurant can sometimes relocate to a smaller unit. A mobile service company can redraw its territory. A bowling center usually has a large, specialized build-out that is expensive to abandon, so the surrounding market has to support the concept for years, not merely during opening month. You need enough households, group activity, evening traffic, weekend traffic, corporate demand, parking, visibility, and discretionary spending to support a property with substantial fixed costs. A center beside growing neighborhoods and employment clusters has more ways to fill its calendar than one that depends almost entirely on Saturday night walk-ins. The next mistake is assuming the lane is the whole product. Bowling is the anchor activity, but the customer's total visit creates the economics. The same group can pay for lane time, shoes, food, drinks, arcade play, party upgrades, and premium seating during one visit. This matters because capacity limits lane revenue. If every lane is occupied at 8 o'clock on Saturday night, you cannot sell the same lane to another group until it turns over. Revenue growth therefore depends not only on getting more bowlers, but also on raising spending per visit and using otherwise quiet hours more intelligently. Food and beverage are central to that strategy. Public company results make the point without pretending that every independent center has the same mix. Lucky Strike Entertainment reported roughly $120 billion of total revenue for fiscal 2025. Of that, about $550 million was reported as bowling revenue, about $424 million as food and beverage, and about $227 million as amusement and other revenue. Those are company-wide numbers across a large portfolio, not a template for one neighborhood alley. But they show why a modern operator may think of bowling, food, drinks, events, and amusement as one connected revenue system rather than treating the snack counter as an afterthought. The quality of those secondary revenue streams matters. A weak kitchen can create waste, slow service, labor problems, poor reviews, and low customer spending. A strong food program can keep a group in the building longer and increase the value of an occupied lane. Alcohol can increase spending, but it also adds regulation, training requirements, inventory controls, insurance considerations, and local licensing rules. In some jurisdictions, the license itself can be a meaningful asset whose value depends on local supply and demand, so an owner should not view bar revenue as high-margin money detached from risk. It is a separate operating business living inside the bowling business. Private events are another piece of the model because they can fill capacity before the doors open. Birthday parties can turn weekend daytime hours into reserved revenue. Corporate events can do the same for weekday periods that might otherwise be quiet. School groups, fundraisers, team events, holiday parties, and social clubs can also create scheduled demand. The advantage is not merely higher spending. It is visibility. A reservation deposit and a confirmed headcount give the operator more information about staffing, food preparation, lane allocation, and expected cash receipts than a business built only around spontaneous traffic. That same logic explains why league bowling still matters even as many centers become more entertainment-oriented. A recurring league can occupy lanes on predictable weekday nights and create regular food and beverage spending. The trade-off is that league customers may expect consistent lane conditions, scheduling, and pricing, while premium social customers may produce more revenue per visit. The best mix depends on the local market. Treating leagues as outdated can be as short-sighted as treating casual social traffic as unreliable. One provides repetition, the other may provide higher value occasions. A balanced schedule can use both. Pricing also has to reflect time. The economic value of a lane at 3 o'clock on Tuesday is not the same as the value of that lane at 9 o'clock on Saturday. An operator can use different prices, packages, minimum spends, or reservation rules across demand periods. The purpose is not simply to charge more whenever possible. It is to protect high-demand inventory while making weak periods attractive enough to generate incremental traffic. A discount that fills otherwise empty lanes can be productive. The same discount offered during a sold-out period can give away revenue without creating a single additional customer. Now turn from revenue to the cost structure, because this is where a full parking lot can become deceptive. A bowling center has meaningful costs before the first ball rolls. Occupancy continues whether traffic is strong or weak. Managers and core staff still need to be scheduled. Insurance remains in force. Building systems continue consuming power. Software subscriptions continue. Property taxes or pass-through charges do not disappear. Maintenance continues because mechanical equipment ages with both use and time. The business therefore needs enough contribution from strong periods to carry the weak ones. Payroll is more complicated than counting front desk employees. A full-service operation may need a general manager, shift supervisors, customer service staff, kitchen employees, bartenders or servers, cleaning staff, event hosts, maintenance personnel, and people who understand the bowling equipment. Lucky Strike's fiscal 2025 filing describes a typical location as employing a general manager, 2 operations managers, a facilities manager, and roughly 20 to 30 associates, while noting that staffing changes with seasonality. An independent center could be smaller or structured differently, but the filing demonstrates the range of functions that must be covered. Insurance and compliance also deserve a separate line in the model. A center that serves alcohol, hosts children's parties, operates a kitchen, employs a sizable staff, and invites customers to participate in a physical activity has exposures that a simple retail store does not share. Coverage may include property, general liability, workers' compensation, liquor liability, cyber protection, and other policies depending on the operation. Requirements and premiums vary too much by state, building, claims history, payroll, and coverage limits to use one universal number. The practical lesson is that insurance should be quoted for the specific deal before closing, not estimated from another owner's center in a different market. Maintenance deserves its own reserve because it competes directly with owner distributions. A motor replacement, refrigeration failure, roof leak, damaged lane component, scoring system problem, plumbing issue, or HVAC repair does not care whether the owner already took money out of the company. Routine maintenance is an operating expense. Major replacements can become capital expenditures. Confusing the two creates a dangerous illusion. A center can report acceptable operating results while quietly wearing out assets that will require a large cash outlay later. Pin setting equipment is a good example of technology changing the cost equation. Traditional freefall machines are mechanically complex and require specialized maintenance. String pin setters use a different mechanism that reduces mechanical complexity. And the United States Bowling Congress has approved qualifying string pin setter systems for certified competition under its equipment standards. Adoption is growing but is not universal. USBC's 2025 state update reported only a small share of certified centers using approved string systems. For an owner, the relevant question is not whether one technology is universally better, it is how conversion cost, maintenance, power use, customer acceptance, league requirements, staff capability, and long-term parts support compare at that specific center. The owner also needs to separate repairs from reinvestment. Customers notice worn seating, dim displays, dated restrooms, tired carpet, poor lighting, slow ordering, and old arcade games, even if the lanes technically function. Entertainment businesses compete partly on atmosphere. That means capital spending does not end when construction ends. Public operators openly discuss spending on new locations, upgrades, and conversions because keeping a venue relevant requires continuing investment. A privately owned center faces the same economic reality on a smaller scale. Consider a simplified educational example. Maya is evaluating a leased 20-lane center in a suburban market. Her model assumes $180,000 of monthly revenue during a representative period. She allocates $35,000 to food, beverage, prizes, and other direct product costs, $52,000 to payroll and benefits, $28,000 to rent and occupancy charges, and $40,000 to utilities, insurance, routine maintenance, software, marketing, cleaning, and administration. That leaves $25,000 of operating profit in the model before income taxes, financing costs, major capital replacements, and owner distributions. The example is not an industry average, and it is not a forecast. Its purpose is to show why revenue alone says very little. Maya's modeled $180,000 a month sounds impressive, but after ordinary operating costs, only about 14 cents of each revenue dollar remains as operating profit in this simplified scenario. If the center is financed and monthly debt service consumes another $12,000, the cash available before taxes and capital spending falls further. If a major air conditioning unit then needs replacement, accounting profit and cash available to the owner can diverge sharply. Now, change one assumption. Suppose a weak month cuts revenue to $150,000. Some food and hourly labor costs may fall, but rent, management salaries, insurance, software, and much of the building cost remain. If total costs only decline to $145,000, operating profit collapses to $5,000. Revenue fell by about 17%, but operating profit fell by 80%. That is operating leverage. It is one of the most important concepts in this business because high fixed costs magnify both good months and bad months. The reverse can also happen. If Maya builds better event sales and raises monthly revenue from $180,000 to $200,000 without needing a proportional increase in fixed costs, a meaningful share of the additional contribution can reach operating profit. That is why corporate events, parties, premium packages, league schedules, and higher spending per visit can matter more than chasing raw customer counts. The goal is not simply more people. The goal is profitable use of capacity, seasonality, and weather make that planning harder. Indoor entertainment can benefit when outdoor plans are unattractive, but severe weather can also keep customers from traveling at all. School calendars, holidays, local sports schedules, tourism, corporate budgeting cycles, and summer habits can change demand. An owner should therefore study revenue by day part and month rather than relying on annual totals. Two centers with identical yearly sales can have very different cash flow stress if one earns steadily while the other depends on a few exceptional weekends. Competition is broader than other bowling alleys. The customer is choosing what to do with a block of leisure time. That can mean movies, arcades, trampoline parks, escape rooms, golf entertainment venues, indoor karting, restaurants, gaming at home, or simply staying in. This changes the standard for the facility. A center that feels tired may lose social customers even if its bowling equipment is technically excellent. Conversely, a polished entertainment concept can attract customers who are only mildly interested in bowling because the activity gives a group something to do together. That is also why the industry has moved toward upgraded seating, digital reservation, better food and beverage, event sales, and more deliberate atmosphere. The shift is visible in Lucky Strike Entertainment's own description of its strategy, which includes traditional bowling locations as well as more upscale concepts with lounge seating, arcades, enhanced food and beverage, and group events. Again, a public company's strategy should not be treated as a guarantee for one independent owner, but it shows where a large operator believes customers are willing to spend. Acquisition economics require another layer of caution. If you are buying an existing center, do not value it by multiplying revenue by an attractive percentage and calling the result profit. Review normalized operating earnings, rent, lease duration, maintenance history, equipment age, liquor licensing, event deposits, working capital, outstanding gift cards, customer concentration, local competition, and required capital expenditures. Determine whether the seller owns the real estate or only the operating company. A profitable operation on an unfavorable lease can be less valuable than it appears. A mediocre operation on valuable owned property may be a completely different investment thesis. Public company transactions also need context. Bolero acquired the 14-location Lucky Strike business in fiscal 2024 for roughly $90 million, then later rebranded the parent company as Lucky Strike Entertainment. That transaction was for a portfolio of locations and related assets, not a price guide for buying one independent bowling alley. Using it as a per-center valuation shortcut would ignore differences in leases, markets, revenue, property, brand, equipment, and deal structure. Financing can make the gap between a good venue and a good ownership outcome even wider. Debt allows a buyer to control a larger asset with less equity, but interest and principal payments claim cash before the owner can distribute it. A center may show positive operating profit and still feel cash poor after debt service and capital spending. Higher leverage also reduces flexibility when a renovation is needed or a weak season arrives. That is why working capital should be treated as part of the investment rather than leftover money after construction. Owner involvement matters too. An owner-operator who personally manages the center may retain cash that would otherwise pay a general manager, but that saving is partly compensation for labor. It should not be mislabeled as passive profit. A manager-operated center can be more scalable and less dependent on the owner's daily presence. But professional management adds payroll and requires systems strong enough to protect service quality, cash controls, inventory, maintenance, and event execution. The correct model depends on whether the goal is to own one hands-on local business or build a portfolio that can operate without the owner standing behind the counter. So what can actually make a bowling alley attractive? The strongest version of the business has several revenue channels: disciplined event sales, good capacity management, a property arrangement that remains affordable, equipment that is maintained before failures become emergencies, enough working capital to survive weak periods, and a management team that understands both hospitality and machinery. It also has a reinvestment plan. The owner knows that some of today's cash belongs to tomorrow's roof, lane upgrade, kitchen replacement, scoring system, seating refresh, or HVAC project. What makes it dangerous is the opposite combination: heavy debt, a weak lease, aging equipment, dependence on a few weekend hours, thin cash reserves, poor food execution, no event pipeline, and an owner who mistakes gross sales for spendable income. In that version, every surprise arrives at the same bank account. A slow month reduces cash. A repair consumes reserves. Deferred maintenance hurts the customer experience. Lower traffic then makes the next repair even harder to fund for educational purposes. Every number in a real purchase should be rebuilt from the actual property. Lease, equipment condition, local licensing rules, staffing plan, financing terms, and historical financial statements. Costs and regulations vary widely by market, and researched ranges are not guarantees. Anyone seriously considering a transaction should verify the records independently and use appropriate professionals, which may include a CPA, attorney, lender, insurance advisor, commercial broker, and bowling industry equipment specialist. The final ownership lesson is simple. A bowling alley may appear to sell games by the hour, but the owner is really managing time, space, machinery, hospitality, and customer spending inside a fixed-cost building. The lanes create the reason to visit. Profitability comes from how effectively the business turns those visits into enough contribution to pay the staff, property, utilities, maintenance, financing, and reinvestment that keep the venue useful. If that system works, bowling can anchor a durable entertainment business. If it does not, even a crowded Saturday night can hide an operation that is consuming more capital than the owner realizes.